Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Welcome back to Blue Boards. This time we're going to be checking out Warfighter, the modern Special Forces card game by Dan Verson Games. And in the background you're going to be seeing what is basically footage of me playing through a game, a mission. I'm building up my troops, I'm equipping them with weapons, equipment, and I don't think there's actually any skills in this one. And I'm just planning out my mission, and then we will actually do the mission. And it's currently going at about 400% speed. I'll probably need to make it faster or slower, depending on how much longer I want to talk about the game. But anyway, Warfighter Modern is the first in this series, and it feels a little bit weird coming backwards to this one, because the first video I did on this series of games was Warfighter Shadow War, which was basically this system, but it had a lot of extra stuff on top of it. It had a stealth system where enemies could see you the longer that you are in basically their cone of vision, and the activity would go up or down, and you would have to manage that by using action cards and staying out of the way of enemies and timing your shots to be absolutely perfect. But in this game, there's none of that. Basically, you've got your mission, you've got your objective. You don't even have an insertion or an extraction. And you put down locations, enemies spawn, and they all know you're there right off the bat, and they just come in guns blazing. And you just need to get to the objective, finish it in whatever means necessary, whether it be just destroying something, killing all the hostiles that are there, so on and so on and so on, until the objectives are complete. And as soon as it's complete, you're done. You don't have to extract, you don't have to worry about anything. It gives the game a lot more of a Call of Duty feeling than a Rainbow Six feeling. But you know what? I still like it. I don't like it as much as Warfighter Shadow War, because I believe Shadow War gives a lot more strategic room while still feeling a bit more true to the idea of military op, because, well, it's not like you're going to just drop in and then every single person you run into is going to start shooting at you, but it's fine. It provides a different feel. It provides a different feeling. With that said, it still has a lot of the things that I like about the Warfighter system. So the main thing I've always liked about this series is the fact that you can customize your soldiers, and that turns into half of the game, with a series of weaponry, including things like shotguns, which are short range but absolutely wreck people. They have a very high chance of actually getting a kill off, but you have to spend a lot of time reloading them. Or you can have an MP5, which is short range. It's silenced, which comes with its own benefits, like being able to not only kill but suppress enemies in the same shot. And then you've got things like rocket launchers, claymores, you've got just rifles, and even like the M16s and the M4s have slightly different properties that make them more appropriate for certain kinds of missions. And you have to think very carefully about what you take in, combined with the fact that your missions can determine not only how far away the end of the mission is, how much time you've got to get there, but how much stuff you can take along with you. And it also helps that you've got 3 different kinds of soldiers. Your player soldiers, which can carry action cards, which have tons of neat little strategies on them that can give you just that little bit of an edge up in a tough firefight, and the ability to get locations, which are the only way to move forward. So if you lose all your player soldiers, the game is over. And I kind of made a mistake on this mission, and I'm more than willing to admit that. I took along only 1 player soldier. You should usually take 2, but I wanted to use 1 of each for the purpose of demonstration. You've also got a non-player soldier, which costs less, but have their own full loadout, which helps give them their own little bit of flavoring. So the guy I brought along with me is very much a medic. He doesn't have much in the way of ranged attack, but he's got an MP5, which is still pretty good. There's not much wrong with an MP5, and he's got a first aid kit. But with the player soldiers, you can fully customize them with skills, equipment, and weapons. The non-player soldiers only get the weaponry and the equipment and the skills that are listed on them, but they cost less than buying a player soldier with those as a result. So you have to think, do I want another hand of action cards, which sometimes you do, or do I want this particular kind of soldier to back me up along the way? And then you've got the squad soldiers, which are basically just like 1 card with a bunch of numbers on them for how much they can roll in order to actually attack an enemy. If you need a couple of backup soldiers, if you need something that's just a little bit bullet spongy, or just being able to throw out as many attacks as possible with as little cost as possible, bring along a bunch of squad soldiers. And so even with the small amount of cards they give you, like they only give you like a deck of 50 to 60 cards, I think it is, of soldiers, weaponry, equipment, and skills. Although the rules say you're allowed to use one equipment card or one weapon across multiple soldiers, so it's not like you need duplicates of everything. You've got lots of different equipment and skills as well, like you got the first aid kit, which can heal you up. You've got body armor, which lets you roll an extra die and see if you're actually able to fend off damage. You've got stuff that'll let you carry more. You've got a canteen, which will let you draw more cards. And with skills, you've got like the ability to hit easier on pistol and SMG shots. The ability to bring along what they call a CX card, which is basically just an extra card you take along with you. There are just a lot of options in how to customize your dudes, and that ends up becoming half the game. Knowing what to take along with you, knowing what you're going to be coming across, and then outfitting appropriately is half the learning curve and half the battle, but it works really well in this game because I've always found myself thinking, even with just like the soldiers that I brought into this mission, I always found myself thinking, I could have done something better. I could have saved like the action card that lets me do a 10-6 on a dice roll and used that to kill the leader, which was bothering me all game. I could have used, I could have brought along like a more powerful weapon like an M249, used that to constantly keep the hordes of them at bay because I was going to need something to help me take out the enemies that would be guarding the helicopter. And all of the missions and all of the objectives are unique. You're always going to have to worry about something different once you get to the objective, whether it be clearing out a bunch of enemies, blowing up something, or so on and so forth. There's always something different to be worrying about. I always find myself thinking, like, I probably could have waited for a better location, held back my dudes, killed the guys that were bothering me, found another location, and used that location as a stepping off point instead of using like the low cost one that I brought out that actually spawned more enemies as a result. You always have these kinds of options and you're always thinking about that next mission. How can I do this better? What can I do differently from what I was doing on the last mission? And that's why I like Warfighter. I always find myself coming back to it. It also helps that this box has got a fair bit of variety, so it actually gives you two different locations. You've got the Cartel, which has its own unique enemy deck, its own jungle location deck, and its own set of objectives and, its own, I just knocked my phone off the desk, my own set of objectives and missions. So you can always vary it up a bit by swapping out a mission or an objective, and it creates a completely different scenario for you. And then you've got, as you are seeing in the gameplay here, the Middle East with a Insurgents deck, its own set of locations, its own set of missions and objectives, and you have to think about it differently. You have to take on the enemies differently as they come. And you can even swap out the Insurgents hostile deck, which is what I'm using here, with a military hostile deck, which is even harder to take out and gives the game a fair bit of variability. And finally, the one other thing that I like about Warfighter is the way that it handles dice rolls, because it actually uses a 2-die system. It uses a 10-sided die, which relies on the number that's written on your weapon card, and a 6-sided die, which relies on what is written on the bottom left corner of an enemy card. And you roll these 2 dice together, and if you hit one of these numbers, it does a suppress. If you hit both of these numbers, it does a kill. And because it's awfully hard for both of these dice to be low enough to actually not hit at least one, it makes it so that bad dice rolls are a lot less likely to happen, and therefore it doesn't feel as punishing when you actually manage to roll just one, because the suppress is still really useful in that you can stop enemies from doing their special abilities, moving, or attacking you, and it adds another layer of strategy. Should I just suppress all of these dudes that are coming at me, or should I actually try and kill them before I move on to prevent them from being a bit of a pain in the neck once their suppressors go away? It's a really clever idea, and it really helps me stay in the game when a few bad dice rolls happen. And at the same time, the enemies will shoot you back in the same way, and they'll end up doing the same thing. So unless they get a really good roll, they're not going to hit you, they're just going to suppress you. So that ends up just being particularly interesting to me as a concept, and thanks to the fact that my dice rolls always tend to be garbage, at least it's a lot less likely to be garbage. And even then, with your dudes, you can choose to fire more bullets, but if you fire more bullets, you have a higher chance of running out of ammo and reloading because you need to roll spectacularly low on the 10-sided dice. So it ends up just being, again, another interesting tactic. Do I risk running out of ammo by firing full auto, hoping that I can get a good hit on this guy? And of course, this can always be supplemented with a good set of action cards in order to get those hits that you desperately need. Or you can use them at the wrong time and end up endangering yourself. So it just ends up being this really interesting strategic puzzle. Do I move my dudes forward now, or do I hold them back, let the enemy come to me and hope for the best? Do I charge forward, suppress everyone I can, head for the objective and get it done as fast as possible in order to avoid this human wave? What do I equip my dudes with? What do I give them in order to try and increase their survivability? And how do I work it into this absolutely tiny budget? It's all been very well balanced in order to make the game hard, but not frustratingly hard. And it has an absolute ton of replayability, plus it has an absolute ton of expansions. And I like what they did with the expansions in this one, which is why I'm depressed that they didn't do it for Shadow War, because the first, 4 expansions, all they do is give you new equipment, new action cards, new hostiles, locations, missions, and objectives to shuffle into their respective decks. So it just gives you more variety, increases the difficulty a bit, but just gives you more to work with, more replayability while not screwing with the base game. And then everything after that is basically, you'll get a unique set of objectives, missions, locations, and enemies, which is fine on its own, but I know what I prefer, which is the first few expansion packs. However, I do not actually have those expansion packs, but I've done enough research into them to know it's basically just more stuff. But frankly, more stuff with Warfighter is not a bad thing in the slightest. You might remember how in my Shadow War video, I actually complained about the manual because you had to be constantly flipping back and forth in order to actually learn the game. Well, because Warfighter Modern is actually a fair bit easier and has a little bit less going for it, the manual actually works alright for it. I could imagine learning the game off this okay, if not great. The main thing I had a problem with, considering that I came back from Shadow War and I knew most of the system already, was basically going back and forth with the keyword reference, because there are a lot of keywords on these hostile cards. So I ended up needing to spend a fair bit of time on that, but honestly, the manual is actually okay if you're not trying to learn Shadow War off of it. I'm also completely fine with the majority of the components here. Most of them are either real photos or 3D models being posed in a specific way to look threatening, and for the absolute majority of the content in the game, it's absolutely fine. However, for the objective cards for the jungle specifically, it looks like they've just taken a bunch of models and posed them in Armor 2, and when literally every other card in the game looks either completely real or real enough to get by, that just kind of sticks out to me. But outside of that, it's absolutely fine, and thematically, it sells the theme just fine. Another nice thing is that you can actually do a bit of cross-compatibility, so you can take your soldiers from this box and their weapons and their equipment and put it into another box, so you can send these guys back to World War II and have them just charge in and see how well they do. Or vice versa, bring some World War II soldiers here, or bring some modern soldiers into Shadow War and see how well they do. And that sort of thing works a lot better because they actually include cards in that box that let you get shadows and let you get the suppressed guns with silencers or whatnot, so that you can actually bring over guns from Modern into Shadow War and have it work just fine. So if you're a fan of Shadow War like me, you can always do that to get yourself a few extra bits for that game. And those are my opinions on Warfighter Modern. It still has a lot of what I like about the Warfighter system, that being choosing and outfitting your soldiers, the variety of every mission thanks to the different locations, the different enemies that you'll be facing, and how those are shuffled up, the action cards giving you a little bit of extra edge over the opponents, the way you roll 2 dice simultaneously so that bad rolls aren't anywhere near as common, and they still help you out if everything's just a little bit low but not too low. And while it is not my favorite of the series, I still prefer Shadow War for its more stealthy approach versus the run and gun action of Modern. I still think this is a really good game, and if anything, it's probably the one I'd recommend you buy first, just because if you buy this, at least when you buy Shadow War, you'll have more of an idea of what you're doing, and you won't need to be constantly flipping back and forth through the manual. And at the end of the day, when I'm playing through a mission, I get overwhelmed by an RPG team and I get the crap kicked out of me, I always find myself thinking, oh, what could I have done that would have been better? Oh, wait for another location to come out, actually kill the opponents. Maybe I should have just suppressed them and ran for it. How could I have equipped my dudes better? And I'm always thinking about that, whether I'm playing Shadow War or whether I'm playing Modern, and that is the sign of a really good game in my eyes. So I wholeheartedly recommend Warfighter Modern to pretty much anybody, and if anything, I recommend you buy this one first, just because A, it's easier to learn, and B, when you do learn it and buy Shadow War, if you like this one, you'll end up knowing most of what you need to do, and you just need to adapt to the new systems. So it's a wholehearted recommend from me either way. So this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.